My name is Margaret Bailey and I can't take this anymore.
For 30 years I've given everything for my son. I sacrificed my retirement, my savings, my entire life, just to be tossed aside like yesterday's garbage. $62,000. That's what I paid to save his house when he couldn't make the payments. And what did I get in return? More demands. More entitlement. And now I've discovered he's written me out of his will completely. As if I never existed. As if I wasn't the one who gave him life, who raised him, who saved him from financial ruin.
Well, listen to me now, David.
You and your wife will regret this. The day will come when you realize what you've done, and by then it will be too late to fix it. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about family betrayal and financial manipulation, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story. Even now my hands shake as I recall how everything fell apart. It wasn't always like this between David and me. There was a time when my son looked at me with nothing but love and admiration in his eyes. I raised David alone after his father walked out when he was just 4 years old. I worked 2 jobs, administrative assistant during the day and waitressing at night, to make sure he never felt the sting of poverty. I wanted him to have everything I didn't have growing up. Maybe that was my first mistake. David was always bright, always charming. He could talk his way into or out of anything, even as a child. I remember his 3rd grade teacher calling me in because he'd convinced half his class to give him their desserts at lunch by promising them future considerations. Even then I laughed it off as boyish cleverness. I never imagined that same silver tongue would one day be used against me. He did well in school, well enough to get a partial scholarship to State University. I took out a second mortgage on our modest home to cover the rest. It's an investment in your future, I told him, believing every word. When you succeed, it's like I succeed too. During college, David met Vanessa. Beautiful, ambitious Vanessa from a wealthy family, who never quite approved of my son's humble background. When they got engaged his senior year, her parents threw an extravagant party at their country club. I wore my best dress, a blue number I'd saved for months to buy, and still felt hopelessly out of place among the designer gowns and tailored suits. "Mom, try to fit in a little better," David whispered when I accidentally used the wrong fork during dinner. "These are going to be my in-laws." It stung, but I smiled and nodded. What mother doesn't want her son to marry well, to rise above the circumstances of his birth? I told myself it was natural for him to pull away, to want to belong in Vanessa's world rather than mine. After graduation, David got a job at a marketing firm where Vanessa's father had connections. They bought a house in an upscale neighborhood, a stunning colonial with 4 bedrooms and a manicured lawn. It was much too big for just the 2 of them, but Vanessa insisted they needed the space for entertaining and eventually children. "It's a stretch financially," David admitted during one of our increasingly rare phone calls.
"But it's all about appearances in Vanessa's circle.
We need to look successful to be successful." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me through the phone. I understood ambition. Hadn't I sacrificed everything for his? But something in his voice worried me, a strain that hadn't been there before. For the first few years, everything seemed fine. They hosted dinner parties and posted vacation photos from exotic locations. My grandchildren were born. First Emma, then Liam, beautiful children with their father's eyes and their mother's poise. I saw them mainly on holidays and birthdays, always bringing gifts that seemed modest compared to the mountains of presents from Vanessa's family. "The kids have so much already," David would say, almost apologetically, as my grandchildren tore through the wrapping paper of my carefully chosen books or handmade sweaters with polite but muted enthusiasm. The cracks started to show when David was passed over for a promotion he'd been counting on. Suddenly, the lavish lifestyle they built became harder to maintain. There were whispered arguments when they thought I couldn't hear during my visits. Vanessa's shopping bags still appeared with alarming frequency, but David's smile grew tighter, his laugh more forced. I was not entirely surprised when the call came, though the timing was cruel. My 70th birthday, a milestone I was celebrating alone in my apartment with a small store-bought cake and a glass of wine. "Non, I need to talk to you about something." David's voice on the phone was tense. "We're in a bit of a rough spot financially." "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my fork. The cake forgotten. It's the mortgage. We're behind, like seriously behind. The bank is threatening foreclosure if we don't catch up. The amount he needed made my heart stop. $60,000. More money than I had ever held at one time in my life. But I had it barely. My retirement fund, carefully built over decades of scrimping and saving, it was meant to see me through my final years with some dignity, some security. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Mom. We can't lose the house. What would that do to the kids? To have to move, change schools? And the embarrassment of it all. I closed my eyes, seeing not the grown man on the other end of the line, but the little boy who had once skinned his knee and looked to me to make everything better. I'll help you, I said finally. But David, this is all I have. My entire retirement.
It's just temporary, he assured me quickly.
Things will turn around soon. I've got some promising projects in the pipeline. I'll pay you back with interest, I promise. I believed him. That's what mothers do. We believe in our children even when all evidence suggests we shouldn't. I transferred the money the next day. David's relief was palpable, even over the phone. For a while things seemed better. The calls became more frequent. I was invited to Sunday dinners. Emma and Liam showed me their schoolwork, and we baked cookies together in the kitchen of the home I had saved. Then 3 months later, David called again. Mom, I hate to do this, but we need a little more help. This time it was for property taxes they hadn't budgeted for. $8,000. I didn't have it, not after the first loan. But I took out a reverse mortgage on my small condo to get it for him. This is the last time, I told him firmly. I've given you everything I have now. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. Things are just tight right now. But it's about to change, I promise. 6 months passed. The promised repayment never materialized. Instead, there was another call, another crisis. Vanessa needed dental surgery not covered by insurance. Liam needed special tutoring for a learning difficulty. The roof had a leak that insurance wouldn't cover because it was classified as wear and tear. Each time, I found a way. I sold my car and started taking the bus. I canceled my supplemental health insurance. I picked up part-time work at the local library despite arthritis that made shelving books an exercise in silent agony. I gave and gave until I had nothing left to give. And then came the day I discovered the truth. It was Emma's 10th birthday party. I had scraped together enough for a modest gift and taken 2 buses to reach their home. The party was elaborate. A unicorn theme with professional decorations, a hired entertainer, and custom-made desserts. As I watched Vanessa directing the event like a general commanding troops, I wondered how they could afford all this if they were so financially strapped. I excused myself to use the bathroom and took a wrong turn in their large house. The door to David's home office was ajar, and I glimpsed him inside on the phone. Yes, we're still planning to close on the vacation property next month,
he was saying, his voice animated with excitement.
The loan finally came through. It's the perfect investment opportunity, and the kids will love having a lake house for the summers. I stood frozen, my gift bag clutched in suddenly numb fingers. Vacation property? Investment opportunity? Where was this money coming from when they supposedly couldn't even pay their mortgage without my help? I must have made a sound because David looked up and saw me. His face changed instantly, a mask of guilt dropping over his features before he forced a smile. Mom, I was just about to look for you. They're bringing out the cake soon. I nodded mechanically and let him lead me back to the party, my mind racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his words over and over. The pieces were falling into place. The continued financial emergencies, despite their seemingly lavish lifestyle. The way Vanessa avoided meeting my eyes when money was discussed. The new luxury SUV in their driveway that no one had explained.
A week later,
I made an excuse to visit when I knew Vanessa would be at her yoga class. I asked David point-blank what was going on. You said you were in financial trouble, but you're buying a vacation home? After I gave you my entire retirement fund.
His face reddened.
It's not what you think, Mom. The lake property is an investment. We got it at a steal because the market's down. When we sell it in a few years, I'll be able to pay you back everything and then some. And the new car? The elaborate birthday party? The renovation you're doing on the master bathroom? I had seen the samples of imported Italian tile on their kitchen counter during the party. "We have to maintain appearances," he said, an edge entering his voice. "You don't understand how it works in our social circle. If people think we're struggling, it affects my business prospects. Everything we do is an investment in our future." "What about my future, David?" "I'm 71 years old. I'm working part-time at the library because I can't afford to fully retire anymore. I've sold everything of value I own to help you, and I appreciate that." "Idon." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite my anger. "Look, I've got a big commission coming in next month. I'll give you some money then, okay? Just don't tell Vanessa we talked about this. She's under a lot of stress with the kids and everything." I left with empty promises and a growing sense of dread. The commission money never materialized, or if it did, none of it made its way to me. Instead, there were more requests. A smaller amount this time, but still money I didn't have to spare. "Mom, the kids' private school raised tuition unexpectedly. We just need a little help to cover the difference until my year-end bonus." "David, I don't have anything left to give you. What about your pearl necklace? The one Grandma left you? You never wear it anyway, and we could get it back for you later." That's when I realized it would never end. The asking, the taking, the empty promises. I was nothing more than a resource to be tapped, an ATM with an increasingly low balance. "No," I said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue after so many yes. "I'm not giving you anything else until you pay back what you already owe me." The silence on the other end of the line stretched out. When David finally spoke, his voice was cold in a way I had never heard before. "I see. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I thought family was supposed to help each other. Family doesn't exploit each other, David. I've given you everything I have. Right. Everything except understanding, apparently." He hung up. Just like that. And the chill that went down my spine told me something fundamental had changed between us. The weeks that followed were silent. No calls. No invitations to Sunday dinner. No pictures of the grandchildren texted with casual updates about school achievements or sports games. I called once, twice, 3 times before finally leaving a message that I missed the children and would love to see them. No response. It was as if a door had closed. When I didn't know how to reopen, I told myself it would pass, that David would cool down and realize family relationships were more important than money. I was wrong. The silence stretched to 2 months, then 3. I sent birthday cards to the children with modest gift cards tucked inside. They were returned unopened. The envelope stamped "Return to Sender" in harsh red ink. Christmas approached. I baked the cookies David had loved as a child and drove a neighbor's car to their house, determined to mend fences. No one answered the door, though both cars were in the driveway, and I could hear the television playing inside. I left the cookies on the porch with a note. When I drove by the next day, the package remained untouched, soaked through from overnight rain. The final blow came on a crisp spring morning, nearly 7 months after our falling out. I received a letter from a law firm representing my son. Inside was a formal notification that I had been removed as a beneficiary from his will, and as the designated guardian for my grandchildren, should anything happen to him and Vanessa. Enclosed was a check for $5,000, a fraction of what I had given him, with a typed note. "This resolves all outstanding financial matters between us. Please do not contact me or my family again." $5,000, a pittance compared to what he owed me, a symbolic gesture meant to close the door permanently between us. In that cold freeze, my family, as if I were no longer included in that definition, I sank to the floor of my small apartment, the paper clutched in my hand, and wept as I hadn't allowed myself to do through all the months of silence. It wasn't about the money, though God knows I needed it. It was the finality of it, the surgical precision with which my son had cut me from his life, after taking nearly everything I had. For days I moved through my routines like a ghost, shelving books at the library, eating tasteless microwave dinners, watching television programs I couldn't later recall. The letter sat on my kitchen table, a poisonous thing I couldn't bring myself to throw away. What had I done wrong? Had I spoiled him too much as a child? Had I failed to teach him the value of money, of family, of basic human decency? Or was it Vanessa's influence? Her family's wealth creating expectations my modest contributions could never satisfy? Did my grandchildren even know what was happening? Or had they been told some sanitized version that cast me as the villain? The questions haunted me, keeping me awake through long, lonely nights. I lost weight.
My co-workers at the library noticed.
Bringing me homemade soups and casseroles with concerned eyes and gentle inquiries I deflected. How could I explain that my own son had extracted my life savings and then discarded me? It was Rosa, my supervisor at the library, who finally broke through my fog of misery. A grandmother herself, she sat me down in the break room one afternoon and refused to leave until I told her everything. "He's stealing from you," she said flatly when I finished my story. "What he's doing is elder financial abuse and it's illegal." I shook my head. "He's my son."
"Being your son doesn't give him the right to take advantage of you," Rosa insisted.
"You need to talk to someone, a lawyer maybe. At the very least, you need to document everything you've given him." The word abuse stuck with me.
I had never thought of it that way.
In my mind, I was simply helping my child, what any mother would do. But as I began to list each transaction, each broken promise, each manipulation,
a different picture emerged.
One of systematic exploitation by someone who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to get what he wanted. I found a legal aid service that offered free consultations to seniors. The lawyer who listened to my story confirmed what Rosa had suggested. I had grounds for a civil suit to recover the money, especially since I had records of most of the transactions and David's own text messages promising repayment. "But he's still my son," I said, the words catching in my throat. "If I sue him, I'll never see my grandchildren again." The lawyer's eyes softened. "From what you've told me, Margaret, I'm not sure you're going to see them anyway. At least this way, you might recover enough money to live your remaining years with dignity." It was the hardest decision I've ever made. Harder than raising a child alone. Harder than giving David my retirement fund. To take legal action against my own flesh and blood felt like an admission of catastrophic failure. Not his but mine. What kind of mother raises a son who would do this? What kind of grandmother takes actions that might permanently separate her from her grandchildren? But what kind of example would I set for those same grandchildren if I allowed their father to treat me this way? What lesson would they learn about how elders should be respected, about keeping promises, about basic human decency? I filed the lawsuit. The formal complaint laid bare the ugly truths in black and white. David Bailey had extracted over $60,000 from his elderly mother through false claims of financial hardship, while simultaneously maintaining a luxury lifestyle and purchasing investment properties. Service of the court papers brought David back into my life with explosive force. He called, voice shaking with rage, not sorrow. "How could you do this to me? To our family? Do you have any idea how this will look to everyone we know? David, you took everything I had. You promised to pay me back. You cut me out of your life when I couldn't give you more. We're going through a tough time right now. That's what family does. They help each other through tough times. You're buying a vacation home,"
I said quietly.
"Your children are in private school. Vanessa just posted pictures of her new designer handbag collection on social media. These are not the actions of a family in financial crisis." He switched tactics, his voice softening.
"Mom, please.
"We can work this out privately. For the kids' sake. They miss you." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh through my tears. "They miss me so much you returned their birthday cards? They miss me so much you pretended not to be home when I brought Christmas cookies. That was Vanessa's idea."
She was angry about.
"Stop. Just stop." I cut him off. "This isn't about Vanessa. This is about you and the choices you've made. I've given you every opportunity to make this right, and you've chosen not to. Now we'll let the courts decide." He hung up on me. Again. But this time I didn't feel the same despair. Something had shifted inside me. A realization that I deserved better. That allowing my son to treat me this way wasn't an act of maternal love but of self-destruction. The months that followed were difficult. David hired an expensive attorney who tried every trick to delay the proceedings and paint me as a vindictive, confused old woman trying to punish her son for perceived slights. My lawyer, working for a significantly reduced fee because he believed in my case, countered each motion with documented evidence of the transactions and communications. Word of the lawsuit spread through my small circle of friends and David's much larger social network. I received calls from distant relatives and old neighbors, some offering support, others expressing shock that I would air family dirty laundry in public. A few of David's childhood friends reached out, sharing stories of how he had borrowed money from them too, with similar patterns of promises never fulfilled. One day, 6 months into the legal battle, I was shelving books in the library's children's section when I heard a small voice. "Grandma." I turned to find Emma standing there, now 11 years old and so much taller than when I'd last seen her. Liam, 8, stood slightly behind his sister, peering at me with uncertain eyes. My heart nearly stopped.
"Emma." "Liam."
I struggled to keep my voice steady as I knelt down, arms outstretched. "Oh, my darlings." They rushed into my embrace, and for a moment, the world righted itself. They still smelled the same. A mix of shampoo and that indefinable scent that was uniquely theirs. I held them tightly, afraid they might disappear if I let go. "We've missed you,"
Emma whispered against my shoulder.
"Dad said you were sick and couldn't see us." Of course he had. "I've missed you too. So very much. But I'm not sick." "Then why haven't you come to see us?" Liam asked, his lower lip trembling. Before I could form an answer, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "Emma."
"Liam. Come here right now."
Vanessa stood at the end of the aisle, her face thunderous. The children pulled away from me immediately, conditioned to obey that tone. "They're checking out books for their school project,"
I said,
rising to my feet with some difficulty.
"I worked here now."
"I'm aware," Vanessa replied coldly. "We'll find another library, please," I said, lowering my voice so the children couldn't hear. "Don't punish them because of what's happening between David and me. They haven't done anything wrong." Something flickered across Vanessa's perfectly made-up face. Uncertainty? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to identify. "David doesn't want them around you," she said, but there was a new hesitancy in her voice. "Do you? Do you think I'm a danger to my own grandchildren? Has my loving them ever been in question?" She glanced at Emma and Liam, who were watching our exchange with wide, confused eyes.
"We'll discuss this another time," she finally said. "Come on, kids. We need to go."
"Can we say goodbye to Grandma?" Emma asked, a hint of defiance in her young voice that made me proud. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded curtly. The children hugged me again, quickly this time, before being ushered away. But as they left, Emma looked back over her shoulder and mouthed, "I love you." It was a small victory, but it sustained me through the darker days that followed. The legal proceedings dragged on with delay after delay. My health began to suffer from the stress. I developed high blood pressure, something I'd never had before. The doctor prescribed medication I could barely afford. Then, unexpectedly, David requested a mediation session. My lawyer was skeptical, warning me it might be another delaying tactic, but I agreed. Despite everything, a tiny part of me still hoped for reconciliation, not just for the money but for the restoration of our family. We met in a sterile conference room at the mediator's office. David arrived in an expensive suit, looking successful and confident on the surface, but I could see the strain around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he arranged his papers. He'd lost weight too. "Man," he said with a nod, not meeting my eyes. "David." The mediator, a calm woman in her 50s, explained the process and then left us alone to talk before the formal session began. The silence stretched between us, decades of love and recent betrayal hanging in the air like an invisible barrier.
"Why?"
I finally asked, the question I'd been holding back for months.
"Why did you do this to me?"
What did I do to deserve this treatment from my only child? David stared at the table.
"It wasn't supposed to happen this way."
"What way was it supposed to happen? You take all my money and then discard me?" "No." He looked up then, and I was startled to see tears in his eyes. "You weren't supposed to run out of money. You weren't supposed to say no." The admission stunned me. "So as long as I kept giving, I'd still be worthy of being in your life? In my grandchildren's lives?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "It sounds terrible when you put it like that. How else should I put it, David? You used me.
You lied to me about your financial situation. You took advantage of my love for you."
"I was desperate," he said, voice cracking. "Not at first. First, we really were in trouble with the mortgage. But then,
It just seemed so easy. You never questioned anything.
you always said yes. In our lifestyle, it costs so much to maintain. The right schools, the right neighborhood, the right clothes and cars and vacations. One mistake, one missed payment or bounce check, and the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. So you sacrificed your mother to keep up appearances? I was going to pay you back. When the investments matured, when my business turned around. When? I asked quietly. When I'm dead and gone. Is that why you removed me from your will? So there would be no record of the debt. He flinched.
It wasn't like that.
Then what was it like, David? Help me understand. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my son, the person I loved most in this world, saw me as nothing more than an ATM with a convenient emotional lever to push. The mediator returns and the formal session began. David's lawyer presented their offer. $30,000, half of what David owed me, to be paid in monthly installments over 5 years, with the first payment to begin immediately. In exchange, I would drop the lawsuit and sign a confidentiality agreement. $30,000? My lawyer looked outraged. The documented loans total over $60,000, and that's not counting the emotional distress or punitive damages we'd seek at trial. My client is facing financial difficulties,
David's lawyer replied smoothly.
This represents a significant portion of his available assets. I studied my son's face as the lawyers argued. Was he really in financial trouble now? Or was this another manipulation? I thought of the vacation home, the private schools, Vanessa's designer handbags. I thought of my empty savings account, my reverse mortgaged condo, my part-time job shelving books despite arthritic hands. I want to see actual proof of my son's financial situation, I said, interrupting the lawyers. Bank statements, tax returns, property assessments, everything. David's face paled. That's private information. So is my retirement fund.
Before you emptied it with false claims of impending foreclosure.
His lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently in David's ear. After a moment of heated discussion, David nodded reluctantly. We'll provide the financial documentation,
His lawyer conceded.
but we'll need time to compile it. We adjourned with an agreement to reconvene in 2 weeks. As we were leaving, David caught my arm. Mom, please. This doesn't have to be so adversarial. We're still family. We? I asked, genuinely curious. You removed me from your will. You kept my grandchildren from me. You returned their birthday cards. What part of that says family to you? He had no answer, only a pained expression that might have moved me months ago, but now seemed too little too late. The 2 weeks passed slowly. I continued my routine, work, home, the occasional dinner with Rosa, or other friends who had stood by me through this ordeal. I tried not to think about what David's financial documents would reveal, whether he had been telling the truth about anything. 3 days before our scheduled mediation session, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Bailey, this is Vanessa. My daughter-in-law's voice was the last thing I expected to hear. Vanessa, is everything all right? Are the children okay? The children are fine. She paused. I need to talk to you. In person. Without David knowing, we arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere we might be recognized. When I arrived, Vanessa was already there, her designer handbag and perfectly styled hair at odds with her nervous expression.
Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her.
I know you have no reason to trust me. Why am I here, Vanessa? She took a deep breath. Because what David did to you was wrong, and because he's trying to hide assets before your next mediation session. The admission hit me like a physical blow. What, the vacation property? He transferred it to my name last week. He's moving money into accounts under my parents' names. He's selling stocks and claiming the proceeds went to pay debts that don't exist. Her hands trembled as she lifted her coffee cup. He's been doing this for years, not just to you, to business partners, to friends. Taking loans, making promises, shuffling money around to maintain the illusion of wealth and success. Why are you telling me this? Vanessa's perfectly mascaraed eyes filled with tears. Because Emma came home from seeing you at the library and cried for hours. Because she asked why Dad would lie about you being sick. Because. Her voice broke. Because I grew up with wealth, Mrs. Bailey. Real wealth. And I never saw my parents treat anyone the way David has treated you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. Everything's here. Bank statements, property transfers, tax returns. The real ones, not the ones he's going to show you at mediation. Her hand shook as she slid it across the table. I can't testify in court. I can't officially be the source. He'd take the children from me if he knew. I stared at the small device that represented my son's final betrayal. Are things really that bad between you two? Let's just say I've seen glimpses of the real David now, the one you've been experiencing firsthand. She stood up abruptly. I should go. I've been shopping for longer than I said I would be. Vanessa, I called as she turned to leave. Thanked you. And please tell Emma and Liam that I love them, that I've never stopped loving them. She nodded once, blinking back tears, and walked away. I took the USB drive directly to my lawyer, who spent the night reviewing its contents with forensic financial experts. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had David systematically drained my resources, but he'd done the same to several others. He was juggling debts, moving money between accounts, taking new loans to pay off old ones. A sophisticated shell game designed to maintain the appearance of prosperity while actual debts mounted. At our next mediation session, my lawyer laid out what we knew without revealing our source. David's face went from confident to ashen as he realized the depth of information we had acquired. This is private financial information obtained illegally,
his lawyer sputtered.
It's inadmissible, perhaps in court,
My lawyer replied calmly.
though we're in mediation now, and regardless of how we obtained it, the information shows your client has been deliberately hiding assets while claiming financial hardship. If Mrs. Bailey chooses to pursue a full trial, we will subpoena these records legally, and they will tell the same story. David stared at me across the table, a mixture of fury and fear in his eyes.
Who told you?
He demanded.
Who gave you this information?
That's not important.
I said quietly.
What's important is that you've been lying. Again. Still, the mediation collapsed. David and his lawyer left in a storm of threats and recriminations.
But 3 days later, a new offer arrived.
Full repayment of the $60,000, plus $10,000 in interest and damages, to be paid in a lump sum within 30 days.
The only condition was the same confidentiality agreement. My lawyer advised accepting.
This is a good offer, Margaret. More than we might get at trial, and without the stress and expense. I nodded, but something still bothered me. And my relationship with my grandchildren? There's nothing about that in here. We can request visitation rights be added, but legally speaking, parents have broad discretion over who their children associate with. Without evidence of abuse or neglect, the courts tend not to intervene. I thought of Emma's face at the library, the way she'd melt "I love you" as Vanessa led them away. I thought of Vanessa herself, risking her marriage to do what she believed was right. Add the visitation request, I said. The worst they can do is say no. To my surprise, David agreed to monthly visitation, supervised at first, then potentially unsupervised if all went well. Whether this was Vanessa's influence or a genuine change of heart, I couldn't know. But it was more than I had dared to hope for. The money arrived as promised. I paid off the reverse mortgage on my condo. I quit the part-time job that had been aggravating my arthritis. I set up a small trust for Emma and Liam's college education, one that David and Vanessa couldn't access. The first supervised visit with my grandchildren was awkward, with a tense David watching every interaction. But the children were resilient, quick to pick up our relationship where it had left off. By the third visit, David was waiting in the car, and by the sixth, he had begun to thaw slightly, even joining us for ice cream. One evening, as he was picking up the children after a visit, he lingered in the doorway of my condo. "Mom, he began, then stopped. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if it can be fixed completely,"
I admitted.
Some trust, once broken, never quite mends the same way. He nodded, looking older than his years.
For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught.
For everything. For becoming someone who could do that to his own mother. It wasn't enough. Not after everything. But it was a start. A small acknowledgement of the pain he had caused, the relationship he had damaged, perhaps irreparably. "I've put you back in my will,"
he said as he turned to leave.
Not that it makes up for anything.
I don't care about your will, David, I replied honestly.
I care about being in your life, and in my grandchildren's lives, while I'm still here to enjoy it. That was 2 years ago. Our relationship remains a work in progress. The easy trust and affection of earlier years has been replaced by something more cautious, more measured. David and Vanessa have entered couples counseling. David is in therapy individually as well, working through the issues that led him to value money and status above basic human decency. I've created a new life for myself too.
I volunteer at the library now instead of working there.
I've joined a support group for seniors who have experienced financial exploitation by family members, a problem far more common than most people realize. I share my story to help others identify the warning signs and find the courage to stand up for themselves.
The money matter is settled,
but the emotional accounts remain more complex. There are good days when it almost feels like before. When David's laugh is genuine and the weight of our history lifts momentarily. There are harder days when a casual comment reveals the gulf still between us, the damage not fully repaired.
But I have my grandchildren back in my life.
Emma is 13 now, showing a talent for writing that makes my librarian heart proud. Liam is 10 with his father's charm but, I hope, a stronger moral compass. I attend their school plays and soccer games.
I bake with them on rainy Saturdays.
I am grandma again, not a forgotten relative they're forbidden to mention. As for David and me, we're finding our way step by careful step toward a new kind of relationship, one built not on the unconditional love of a mother for her child, but on the more complex love between two adults who have hurt each other deeply and are trying to move forward with clear eyes and honest hearts.
I don't know if I'll ever completely trust him again.
I don't know if the son I thought I raised will ever fully reconcile with the man he became, but I do know this. Standing up for myself was the right choice. Not just for my financial security but for my dignity and self-respect. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is set boundaries, even with the child they would once have given anything to protect. And perhaps the most valuable lesson in all of this is one I hope my grandchildren have absorbed, that their grandmother at 73 years old found the courage to say enough and demand better. That age doesn't diminish a person's right to respect, to honesty, to basic human decency. That love without limits isn't love at all. It's exploitation. And that it's never too late to write a new ending to your story.